Welcome back to the last panel of our symposium. It feels like we've done a lot today, and we've covered a lot of ground. And I'm so excited for this panel because we have an awesome lineup of people that I really adore and admire. I was really delighted when we were trying to bring in an expert who could speak from the Finnish government's own approaches and views regarding AI policies and the role of technology in society. And Miapetra Kumpula-Natri is a member of parliament in Finland, and she has also been in a European Union committee dealing with the AI Act and the implications of AI in society. She can tell us more about that. And my dear colleague, Salla-Maaria Laaksonen, is a scholar based at University of Helsinki, and she has been working in computational social science and has been actually my collaborator on many projects, so it's so nice that we can be on the same panel. Joonas Leppänen is at Sitra, which is a think tank based in Finland, I guess the largest think tank, and he will tell us about that. And he works on democracy and participation. And we've talked many times about how we can think about the role of equitable technologies to support democratic processes in society. And finally, we have Teivainen, who is a professor of world politics at the University of Helsinki. And many of you may have taken his courses or have graduated from his programs. He has just a really breadth of worldviews on these issues. So I want to have a really nice conversation with all of you today. So thank you for joining us. All right, how do we begin? I thought we could all just have some opening remarks. And maybe I'll start with Salla, that could anchor our discussion. Because we've talked a lot today in the symposium about all of the challenges of how AI is used in very different problematic contexts. We've talked about the role of civil society, but we haven't really talked as much about policy and regulation and what is our responsibility, both in the European context and in the global context, and particularly Global South, which I come from. So I want to sort of have an exploratory discussion on all these issues together with us. There are many developments in the European Union, positive developments, I would say, with the proposed AI Act that is now coming into compliance across member states. And it has many interesting and meaningful provisions that protect civil rights and to some extent human rights. But there are also many carve-outs in the AI Act for surveillance and military technologies that we have to be conscious about and we have to actively interrogate. So while we have good regulatory frameworks in the EU, we also have many gaps in how those frameworks can be used in ways that are inimical to civil society protections. So I want to help us unpack that. And what does it mean for democracy in Europe, but what does it also mean for democracies and democratized rights all around the world? The policies and decisions we make in the EU have an effect around the world. And I think we have to think about our responsibility here. So maybe I'll start with Salla to offer some opening remarks and comments, and then we'll pass it around. Yeah.
Great, thank you, and great to see you all still here, and most of you awake. I will maybe continue with the word that has been mentioned quite many times today, which is accountability of technology or of technology companies or platform companies, which is actually something what I have been studying for the past 4 years as well and trying to figure out how that would actually work. The problem maybe with accountability is first of all that typically with accountability we have some formal mechanisms how we actually kind of pursue that. We might have some like legal ways how to actually hold some actors accountable. But kind of the case with platform companies and with big tech for a long time has been that we don't really have those means. Maybe now we kind of do with the new EU legislation. But mostly still, we're now seeing kind of the first cases being pursued by the EU at the moment. But mostly all these discussions are still about social accountability, which means that kind of the responsibility to hold these companies accountable, it's basically on us here. And that's a pretty large role and large responsibility to have. And I would say that we also have quite limited means as the populace or as the citizens to actually make some changes there. So what we've also been looking at in this project that we've been now in 4 years, it's also specifically the role what the platforms have taken in conflicts and wars, and which is obviously very versatile and multiple. We've already discussed all these today. They take part in information dissemination. Their content moderation practices are affecting what happens in conflicts. But also, as we have also discussed today, they're hosting data, they're hosting systems. They are also providing infrastructure. For example, the Starlink system in Ukraine has been used there, and all these other cases in Gaza and Israel. So it's really infrastructural on many levels, and that also makes it even further difficult to find those means of like pursuing the accountability. And at the same time, we have the platforms themselves that are really kind of trying to position themselves still as neutral mediators. They really want to kind of escape any responsible role that they would basically have in these conflicts. Maybe the only kind of notable exception, which is something that my colleagues Matti Pohjonen and Mervi Pantti have actually been studying and are working on very moment, is kind of looking at different conflicts and how the platforms engage with those. So basically the only notable exception seems to be the Russian invasion on Ukraine, which was the first time when the platforms actually kind of took a stance and sort of geopolitically aligned themselves and their sort of opinions with those of the West. But we haven't really seen anything similar going on with the other conflicts that we're witnessing now at the moment, and most notably maybe not with the conflicts that are taking place in the global south. So that's also a very fair question to ask, and that was actually also asked from the audience earlier today, like what is kind of defining when we have the interest to the platform actions, and is like Ukraine close enough so that the platforms are also interested and actually kind of acknowledge their responsibility? I don't know, and that's also a problem with these actors, that we are here only guessing what are their intentions and what are their strategies, because we have really, really limited means to see inside these huge companies. So I don't know, maybe as a last thing, this is kind of also, maybe we're passing to Miapetra next, but I'm also thinking about the AI Act and also the DSA and the DMA, which are really, really great initiatives in my opinion. But my big question would be maybe like, how do they actually apply in times of war, when we have so many other forms of legislation and treaties as well that are completely forgotten if that's the case? So in kind of these conflict situations when we're not in a normal state by any means, where's the power actually? But maybe that's something to start with.
Yes. Now you really like last 30 seconds change my title then. That if it's how it functions during the war, and that there is war somewhere, but should they then it function everywhere else than the war zone itself, and how to include it? Maybe I take it a bit more easy start and then warm up for the most difficult part. Recognizing the infrastructure, it's very much easier to be on the same side that the defense uses the new technologies, even if they are private ones, as I put it, for the SpaceX or other satellite systems, than when they are on the opposite side, that the attacker or provoker also is using them. But I can mention from the technology side that we still have open multi-stakeholder internet, and there were calls also that should Russia be taking away from the internet, from like really the technological attack to help Ukraine. But that decision was then done that let's keep the core of the internet, the technical layer, open for everyone. Because if we start blocking it from the technical perspective, then nobody in Russia will have not any other information than even it is tried to be blocked now, but there's always kind of ways to bypass that. But if we start breaking the roots of the internet, then it will be hard. And then there's so many layers on the technical infrastructure, and I'm not specialist on that. I always say that I am NMT time engineer, so much more before the 3G, 5G, 6G, and quantum and others. So my technological knowledge is not enough, but there's still understanding that the platforms have been taking so big role also for the information, and what is the societies without information and trust. So that has been an idea of the last 10 years that I was in the European Parliament, and I came back to Finnish Parliament now in July, only has been this human centricity. What we do, if you put the title human centricity, so then it is to make the technology to help humanity and human societies, including, of course, the needs of the climate change and big challenges that we are facing. So we are not, the whole Europe is not regulating only to make it difficult for industries or enterprises to innovate, but it is this human centricity, the big main goal. I used to ask all the lobbyists who were worried of too much of regulation that what are you intending to develop if you are so afraid that you cannot suck the people from the companies by AI-managed learning systems without somebody being in charge when you make a decision that are the core like rights of the persons. So your daughter didn't get into the university, and why? If nobody can not answer, because it has been trained system to say that. So that is what we wanted to do with this AI regulation, to put some framework where you can innovate. But then we had so many real-life cases already when we concluded December 23, that the list of the bans were actually all from the real-life experience. So facial recognition, or it's called the biometric real-time identification. It was not totally then banned because the states, the council side, they were afraid of the security challenges, so maybe a little on the border control or so. But then also, you have, of course, easy to develop AI systems that can then predict that you might be the next criminal, because where you were, with whom you were, from what kind of background, where your parents lived, and this is not the Europe we want to have. So then I'm been then more championing that we don't regulate too much, we put a framework where to innovate, and I'm like seeing that everyone, like if I'm once there where people are interested on the ethical regulation also, and then next event I'm there to be blamed that Europe is blocking the innovations because we are regulating too much, and then you find figures that USA only had 3,500 pieces of legislation and Europe 12,000. For me, these are not very clever numbers, because when Europe wanted to make less regulation, they put 4 old regulation to 1. So then it was the longer regulation, but it was only 1. so maybe more electoral audience here, so we can talk that why to regulate and how to regulate. So this AI Act, which is only one in the world, it was the first one, the legislative, but now there is also Council of Europe agreement with the 46 countries, full members, but that convention or that a treaty or agreement also includes more countries than European Union countries only, so also the observers, like United States. So there is more. I had the text message from Tanzanian colleague that now EPU, the International Parliamentary Union, they also have now democracy and AI. You have UNICEF idea. So at least the politicians, we feel that some framework for the AI innovations and use cases should be implemented. So I will stop with this AI regulation. It is banning something that is extreme, that we don't want the European Union to be placed to use them. Then it is FRIA, which was included, so fundamental rights assessment process. because we know how the engineers look, if this is too slippery for the dancers, or if some machine is cutting your fingers and not only the carrots, and so this kind of project development or regulation. So also in this one, we think someone has to check the fundamental rights and democracy and so on. And then for the third, it is not Europe alone to regulate. There has been international talks, and for example, the President Biden did the executive order, and you recognize very same pieces there. The public side using AI in the United States have to make the blue mark and mark when it's a fake video or kind of AI developed. So same standards are developed to make it more trusted and more acceptable, and I always said trust and acceptable, not so to be the regulation, so that if it's not true. So that we also want to see that it is possible to trust some AI-used tools in Europe, but then the framework has been set now.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm Joonas Leppänen from Sitra. Well, Sitra, I guess roughly you could categorize it as a think, connect, and do tank. I mean, we do a lot of stuff that think tanks do, but we also bring different actors together, do different trials, and then try to kind of work for the betterment of the Finnish society as a whole. We have actually done a lot of work in participation and democracy, and this would also be kind of my point of view into this discussion. And I guess it would be what Salla said, that it's on us to kind of start to take back kind of how these technologies work, and as Miapetra said, talked about human-centric technology or human-centric development of technology, and what this could probably entail. I mean, if we go a bit back, there is, I mean, a yearly Edelman trust barometer where you have been measuring trust in societies on kind of different sectors of society. And earlier, usually the trust was waning towards governments, but actually going up towards the private sector and companies. Now in the last barometer, there was actually trust in big tech driving innovation, and especially AI was going down. So what we kind of see is that people are not trusting big tech or AI companies to actually work for us any longer. And then this kind of combined with, for example, this is something that is quite normal in other countries also, but for example in Finland, we did a survey where we asked people how they want to participate, and we asked both the decision makers and the citizenry. And what we actually found out that, one thing that we found out was that a lot of the decision makers actually didn't trust in the citizens' capabilities of even taking part in a political discussion. So we would also have a kind of situation where trust kind of from the decision makers towards the citizens was quite low. So combining this, I mean, there is this kind of common wisdom that, I mean, to give no trust is to get no trust. You have to start somewhere. And I guess with regards to both AI and politics, this has to do with participation. And for example, one way of doing this with regards to AI would be what we call alignment assemblies. The idea is roughly that you have a lot of people participating on the discussion what AI should do, should not do, how it should regulate itself, and then this mass of information would be kind of funneled into the language model and used to teach it. And from here you could actually kind of start to take a bit back the kind of power and what these AI models do. For example, this is something that has been done. Anthropic, one of the bigger AI companies, used this method to create what they call a constitutional model, or they created a constitution for the AI, which is always refers to before it gives you an answer on something. So if you ask it, I mean, how would you create a bomb or something? It always refers to that one, and then it answers that no, this is something that it shouldn't give an answer for. So this is something that, besides actually giving some rules to it, it could also be done in order to ensure that it actually works with regards to the values that we want it to kind of work along. And also it could be actually used to kind of align them in a way so that they would ensure that minorities, for example, would be portrayed correctly. I mean, at least in theory. Obviously, there's a huge mass of information in them, and that's a problem in itself. But at least this is kind of the possibility that, I mean, we need regulation giving the framework where we work within, but after that it has a lot to do with norms and kind of ethics and how we want them to work. And this is something that we can actually start to do. And also the tools for doing it are available. For example, well, in Finland we have brought here one of the participatory platforms that have been used to do, especially the Anthropic version, but have been used a lot in Taiwan for participation, which is called Polis. Finland is nowadays actually one of the leading countries that are using this and developing it. So, I mean, we have the tools for doing it. I guess it's more or less of having the will and having actually connecting different actors to get together.
Wow, great stuff, good questions. I'm Teivainen from the University of Helsinki, and I apologize, I will need to rush out kind of soon. The points you brought up where, I mean, there was a lot on, I think, democracy and participation and stuff like that, and then we have this sort of AI pact by the European Union. So perhaps one thing I was thinking about, I've been trying to understand a little bit something people call digital colonialism and how to think about global power relations in the context of AI production and machine learning more generally. So, okay, now we have this EU new regulation, and it seems like how many people say it's kind of perhaps better than, okay, let's say, reading some African stuff, they say, okay, there's this Chinese model, and they have a lot of emphasis on social control, like Miapetra, I think, was referring to that risk also, and then the more business-oriented US model. And this European thing sounds kind of cool, but often when we say, you know, we have the best model for everyone to use, you know, history tells us it's not necessarily so. So how do you see the process of more global participation for creating rules for more global AI regulation, if we want to use that term? What kind of stuff do you think others would put there that would make it different from the one we use in the European in the European Union, and what have you heard about it? What are, I mean, like more community-based stuff that some Africans might say and all that. And also, this is something that with Joonas, we were talking here, like this participation thing. Like also, is it, of course, there's digital colonialism, we have these new technologies, they spread, they've been used to suppress, you know, colonized people for a long time. And then in this machine learning, and I started thinking now, because normally I think AI, I'd rather talk about machine learning, and learning brings nice sort of processual dimension there. But there are also people involved, so it's not only machines. And you were saying, like, you know, when the technologies and algorithm-based stuff spreads, you have more people from places where there are many people, India, China, whatever. And when they start using these, does it mean that the learning becomes decolonialized a little bit once you get zillions of people from all parts of the world? Then the algorithms are sort of, the regulation happens also through participation, because the machines are learning through how people, how they interact with them. So is this a pipe dream? Is this like something that tech people use to fool us into thinking that, yes, AI can provide more democratic world? Or is there something to it? And it's a little bit like when thinking something, studying corporations and stuff. In some sense, one could think, okay, well, let's have algorithm-based kind of interaction to replace the need for bosses, right? And let's have democratic flat hierarchies and all that. And there's something to it. And then you start looking at how these corporations are actually being governed, and it's pretty traditional. You look at who owns them and property and all that, and the nice ideas there are maybe not. But could we? Is there something there? Can we use algorithms to create more democratic functioning, not only in terms of replacing elections and referendums and participatory democracy in that sense, but also in everyday, like corporate decision-making in more democratic corporations. What do you think? Can it happen? And perhaps a third point about bringing where I see actually some opportunities. I've been arguing, and I'm not normally seen as very techno-lover kind of person, that artificial intelligence or machine learning will save the Finnish language. Because we will soon, in the university where I work, because soon we will be able to use our own language, and the machine translation will take care that everybody can read it anywhere all the time. Okay, I'm simplifying a little bit, but we are getting closer to that, which means Finnish can still exist as an academic language because of the translation mechanism. Does this apply to all? Finnish is already quite big in the networks, in digital world, not small, but rather big language. So Africans, for example, suppression of sort of native languages has been one part of colonialism. So could we apply same thinking? Could sort of translation machines save languages that might go extinct because of what we assess to globalization? Because with translation machines, they can exist more easily and interact in this globalized world. I know this sounds like I'm totally doped by techno-optimism here, but the last one I actually think is, at least in Finnish language, is something that is going to happen.
Really, really excellent points from all of you, and especially Teivo at the end, bringing these nice provocative questions to us. I do want to remark that there's another language that is being colonized by Finland, Sami language, which is increasingly being threatened. And actually, one of my colleagues, Mikko Kurimo, in Aalto University, is working with researchers to build language models to support better language training for Sami. Of course, we need to work with the Sami community to get their permission and to engage with them constructively in the process. So it's already within the Finnish Nordic context, if you think about our role in colonizing technologies and how we have to really work with that critically. But I want to pass on to Salla because she had some other comments on this.
Yeah, I have to build on Teivo's idea of like democratizing algorithms. I love your thinking, and let's see if I'm debunking it or what happens. But I think first of all, why I really like you brought it up is because when we talk about technology, I think we should always talk about values, because we don't have technology that would be value free. And I think this was also brought up by Anthony Loewenstein, for example. So there's always some ideology. Maybe sometimes we recognize that, but other times we just don't. And if you think about like meta products, for example, they are really good at recognizing like naked women and kind of removing that if you're too naked. But it's much more harder than with hate speech. But that's a political thing or ideological thing, because that's what like the US culture is like. You need to be able to remove that. So basically just recognizing that whenever we are designing algorithms or machine learning systems or AI, there's always ideologies involved, and it somehow affects that. And I think we maybe don't know enough how it affects. And maybe another small thing I would like to also add is that whenever we talk about AI or machine learning, it's always kind of an assemblage of different things. It's the people who are using it, people who are designing, it's the context, it's the ideologies, it's everything. So you cannot really even kind of separate that machine learning system from other things. So we cannot even look at that alone, because there's always someone who is doing and designing and using and kind of affecting that. So yeah.
Technical system, as we say.
Yeah, well, just to kind of a bit going back to also Teivo's point there, I mean, if the idea of doing it globally, I mean, obviously it could be, and this is actually something that is being at the moment done, is that you're doing in different countries these alignment assemblies and then posting them in a kind of open source repository. So you actually, in theory at least, would possibly see after a while a huge repository of kind of voluntary information where people want to kind of align the AI towards the people. This doesn't take away the need for regulation, but I mean, as an optimist, I could say that it could be used for the betterment of all. And the translation part, actually, the Sami language is a very, very good example because when we brought, for example, this participatory platform Polis to Finland, it uses Google's translation, so you can actually participate in your own language. And when we brought it, it was only available actually in the languages that obviously Google Translate allows. Nowadays, one of the Sami languages is actually available, so you can have them participating on their own language, and it actually translates everything. So this is actually probably more has to do with which languages we can. But of course, it also means that when kind of talking about the promises of technology to kind of better democracy, we should always take into account these minorities because obviously they come a lot later than the kind of main languages. So, yeah. But I would say, going back to where democracy and also regulation goes, the same and a similar idea works with regulating AI that goes with regulating society. We have this framework of democracy where we kind of agree within which boundaries we can disagree. And this is, I guess, the same idea that we should kind of create with regulation of AI, agreeing on the boundaries of AI, and then you could make them kind of country-specific or something.
Yes, very mind-blowing comments, and then I think loud that yes, at the same time we are talking about the global south differences, but the biggest tech companies have found something that very similar in every human being. That's why we are using their services. We are not that different. We all like to have everything important with us. This is access for information. I don't need to take from my parents' house in Lapland a train a couple of days to Central Library of Helsinki to learn or see something global that was not even public library, bibliothèque, so to brought there. So we have that all here, and it seems to be that African, Asian, European, American all like that. So there are so many technical standards that still are interesting for all. So also take that. And then yes, we just reached now a digital global compact in UN. So also starting on this human centricity and understanding and transparency and starting to build on something that we also have in common. Goes very far from the question that what about the wars we are doing, but let's have some positive moments here and then think that we still are everyone human beings. But also the challenges are very same. I remember talking to the UNICEF, and they had like these videos of the parents, and the same parents challenges that your child, once they get the mobile phone, do they use it for good or for bad? And then, so actually when we talk about AI, I think the reason is that it's so exciting, we should talk about the data. And then the data is then that who is developing that data and who is taking the economics of data in their pockets. Use it for good or use it for getting too big. Thank God Google has a lot of data and has trained now with the DeepMind the new technological revolutions on valkuaisaine, whatever the proteins and so. So we will have like new generation of medicines to come. But then at the same time, United Nations wants to everyone to be able to log into the internet, so have the digital connectivity. We are still lagging like a couple of billions from the internet only. When they get that, do they get also the economics better? Do they get more jobs to their villages or their cities? Is it helping them to solve the food crisis or the climate crisis or the weather conditions or the internal democratic structures? But it seems to be Global South's first requirement for UN was that to get connected. And I was afraid that don't repeat, do the other way, that we have learned a lesson and skip it, like not to start building economy on the fossils and then try to clean it afterwards, but make these leaps and development leaps. So also thinking of the challenges and possibilities. I was jealous that India now has the payment system that is created by the central bank, so they have own system for the streets, so the poor can pay the poor, but the rich can pay the poor another way around. And it's not dependent on the global private company doing the thing. So technological innovations are very many to come. So even it's less sexy and not blowing the minds, data is the key and who has the power. So, and it's also from the history that who then powers the technology, powers the economy, and who powers the economy is then stronger for the weapons, and then that is also threat or the war. So I a little bit tried to link where we started from here.
Teivo to give a closing comment because he has to leave very quickly.
But you can continue. Are you having a party here afterwards? Okay, so because I need to rush out in this, what I imagine will be a worker-controlled, the AI-driven technology company where the driver will take me where he's actually waiting already. Okay. Actually, it's not. It's Uber. But what you were saying, Miapetra, now just reminded me of now there's this BRICS meeting going on. We were talking about BRICS. And they are claiming, of course, we can have many doubts about what kind of, authoritarian powers are there as well, but they're trying to design technology-based systems where financial interactions can be done without the need for US banks and sort of these tubes through which to communicate. So what happens through technology locally in India, what you said, could also happen globally, like creating financial information flow networks without the banks. What Joonas was saying just about these people using their own language. I've been in meetings where you have Mexican social movements and South Africans, and then they just write in whatever colonial language they use, English or Spanish or something, and it goes immediately, and it has sort of facilitated some of that communication among social movements as well. All right, but I thank you. Please have a good rest of the...
And please come back after the thing.
Right. Only if you have a good party.
There's a great party happening.
All right, good.
Yeah, actually, if you would continue with Uber and then also data, because it kind of seems relevant when he's running to the taxi. But I guess it has to do with what Miapetra also says about who owns the data. And that, I mean, is obviously something that nowadays the huge tech giants owns all data from us. In this way, I mean, the north-south dichotomy, I mean, we are all equal in the tech giants oppressing us. I mean, we are equally oppressed with regards to kind of stealing our data and using it for other goods. That is something that we have to address, and that is something that regulation takes. But with regards to Uber, there's also the possibility of doing it in different ways because of regulation. I mean, obviously, usually people say that, wow, we have new technology that makes things us able to organize in different ways. You have these different platforms, Uber, Airbnb, or whatever. They are not that, I mean, different than before. Someone pays and someone gets paid, and if they don't do it, you get fired or you don't get paid. So, I mean, it's kind of a normal way of organizing. But what actually was done in France, in Paris, because of EU regulation, was that those drivers that actually, taxi drivers that are driving using some of these platforms, they actually asked their own data, to get their own data. And when they got their own data, they pulled this voluntarily together and started comparing how much they got paid. So they actually could start to get a fairer wage because of the regulation and this is actually a new way of organizing. So actually in here you can see that regulation actually drove a social innovation forward that technology didn't actually facilitate.
So we're painting a very positive, I think it's nice to end the conference also with some positive thoughts, but I do want to bring us back to the hard problems we are now facing in the global context of war and human rights. And what can we do in legislation, in global conventions, in pacts. There's the Global Pact for AI that has been talked about. But all of these, there's a power dynamic that happens in these, obviously. It's which countries which countries sign on to this, how they allow other member countries to have a say or not a say in that. And when it comes to specifically military use of technology, almost every policy and regulation has a carve-out to say, well, except for when you use it for surveilling citizens, except for when you use it for military use, well, then it's, we're not going to regulate that. And it comes particularly from certain EU member states, like Hungary and Poland and others who have a particular worldview, but I wouldn't say every member state agrees with that. So there's a negotiation that happens in Brussels. But I just want to think through with you guys, especially with Miapetra, given your experience working in the EU, what are some innovative approaches to deal with what's happening now on our planet in the context of war in Gaza and Ukraine? Is there any chance we can come up with a way of regulating arms trade, regulating the use of AI in these sensitive contexts? What mechanisms can be used to uphold the European, at least, mindset of democratic thinking and values when it comes to military use of technology?
We can use this one. Yes, the AI Act itself, it was talked about it, but then left outside, so it's not covering the war and weapons. I don't know how is the EU right level, if EU or this group of 27 countries, 11 neighboring Russia or Belarus, makes legislation alone that we don't allow this or we don't use it. Should it be then more global scale that agreements, like normally the agreements on disarmament, are a bit broader? So, and I very much see the tendency and the talks changed in Finland after the 2.5 years when the Russia went into the Ukraine. So it's quite hard to put limits on one side only when we need to kind of be prepared that we are not attacked by the neighbor. When their talks are getting so hard and then its talks are getting into real action. But then at the same time, I really must call that technology will have also the global scale, and that's what I'm mentioning also, that the democracy is recognized, like AI impact on democracy in so many countries, because in the end, even the resources for armies and foreign policy being part of the countries, if there is democracy, there is also responsibility for the citizens. So that is the core question, to try to help that AI will help the social structures. So that is like not something soft policy and then hard policy is only setting standards and to prevent it. But I call for the higher level and then the concrete disarmament or rules on there. And there the UN is the very good level and right level. We were talking also like neurotechnologies, that how to integrate them, and then I talked to the Professor Juste, who's chairing heading the brain research in USA for billions for 7 years. He said that it's not enough you put it in the AI regulation. It should be criminality against a human being in the UN level. So the hardest you can do if you start playing with the human subliminary consciousness, what he's able to do with the mouse is if you start playing that with the people. So there are certain levels that the EU is not enough to act, and we have to reach for the global agreements and contracts. On this one, it's when it's on the security, and this is my personal own opinion, we always can say the Brussels effect, that once we regulate something, and the people from the other part of the world said, how would this platform regulation help us, that you may not put the fake news and the platform is responsible? I had many youth from like Australia and others taking online conferences asking how that can help us. And I'm sorry, I can't regulate as a European legislator Australia or India or South Africa, wherever the Kenyans young, so they can copy, they can learn and put it on the national. But then on conventions we have to do in the UN level, and I still strong believer of the multinational structures that we have, so really much playing that there.
Okay. We've run out of time, but if there's any one or two very quick questions, we can just put it on the table and then we have to move on to the next thing. And maybe if we just can find a mic to, yes, so it's right at the very end, and we may not be able to address them all, but we have actually a performance right after this that we want to be able to get to. So let's try to.
Hey, thank you. This is not a question. It's a comment, mostly to Salla-Maaria Laaksonen, who mentioned in the beginning that it's only Ukraine that has triggered the big social media giants to regulate their content. In regards to Israel's actions during the last year, there's a lot of anecdotal and already some academic research on how Meta especially is censoring content on Instagram and on Facebook. And I think that this, if I could formulate this to a question, maybe the question would be that how do we regulate companies from regulating their content or using the AI tools to censure? Like how do we regulate them not to do that?
Okay, let's put that question aside. Anything else before we? Yes, maybe right there, and then we'll. Yes, you can shout, but it's for the live stream, so we have to try and get the question to the mic to your. And then, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Matteo Stocchetti. Question what has been left behind. First of all, to pick up on ideology, like Salla actually mentioned, you know there is an entire universe of alternative technology which is called digital commons. Digital commons is not only a different technology, it's a different ethics of technology, it's a different and very sophisticated form of control, community control of technology, which I got the impression would solve a fair share of the problem which we mentioned in this session. The second is trustworthy AI is a no-go. Trust is is an element of a human relationship. The concept of trust refers to the future, and we cannot leave the future to machines. And of course, there is the tendency of using AI as a metaphor in order to humanize technology. And there is available research in the field, philosophy of technology, which the more we humanize technology, we more dehumanize humans. So I would really, don't you think we should not use that word? You know, machines can be reliable or not if they do what they're supposed to, but we cannot regulate about future behavior, which is the essence of trust. I mean, if I trust somebody, I give a blank check. I have, for right or wrong, believe that the person will not screw me if he or she has a chance. We cannot do that with AI, although we know company would like that to be regulated. So once you have the rules, you can, of course, find a way to get around of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have to maybe just offer everyone a chance to give you very quick, less than 1 minute remarks, and then we will wrap up the session.
Yes, I think we really have to run, so just a quick comment. Yes, absolutely, platforms are doing a lot of stuff all the time and also related to the Israel-Gaza war. So that was mostly like how they have kind of really used their corporate communications and came out with something. So, but you're absolutely correct on that. And the other comment is too lengthy to answer at the moment.
Yes, we try to make trusted systems, but it's very much philosophical. Right, what you said, I would maybe send us at transparency. If you replace everything I said with the transparency, so then we go for the direction that we aim to try to get trusted society. But then I very much agree with that point as well. So add transparency so you know and can evaluate whether you can trust a system, maybe is the technically the way put it forward.
Yeah, I guess also, I mean, the idea of digital commons, obviously that is something that we should foster. I mean, for example, the idea behind alignment assemblies is actually to create a repository which is open sourced. And actually, in a way, it would be some kind of collective, kind of freely shared data. And this is the way that the public sector probably should more and more go for, kind of fostering these parts. the trust issue, I mean, we usually talk about trust towards the companies, not the trust, I mean, towards the chatbot or whatever. I mean, obviously, that's a different thing, but it's good to always point this out. I guess in Finnish it's more easy because you have tekoäly, which probably kind of more precise way would be tukiäly, which would kind of, I can a bit kind of clarify this dichotomy.
Great. Hey, we have to wrap up the panel, but it was so great to have Miapetra with us, and also Salla and Joonas and Teivo to join us for this really nice closing panel for our symposium. Thank you so much.